Hi, I'm Jim Boardman from Palo Alto Networks Academy, and this is the 10th video in a series of videos directed towards students competing at CCDC competitions. The purpose of this video series is to show you how to deploy and configure our VM100 firewall appliance on an ESXi host to protect your servers that are running on the same ESXi host. In this video, we will look at the interface configurations for our virtual servers that are being protected by our VM100 firewall appliance. We'll test to ensure that we can now access the Web UI management interface from virtual clients that are running on the inside of my network in the trust zone of my firewall appliance. And then finally, we'll configure dhcp. So before we move on, let's do a quick review of where we are. So many of you, when you enter your competition area, not all of you, but many of you may be faced with this situation. And we've discussed this before. I have my virtual servers that are running on an ESXi host. They're running services like a web application, and they're connected directly to the competition network through a virtual switch and through the host of through the adapter on the host. So if I want to access my website on my virtual server here, I have a fixed IP address. Now this fixed IP address you can't change by competition rules. So I would then access it from the competition network through the NIC, and I'd go directly to the virtual server. So this is the environment that we've been setting up. So here in this incident, instead of going directly to the virtual servers, okay, I have to go through the firewall appliance. And what we've done, what we did in the last couple of videos, is we've set up the data interface. We set up the external data interface, which is facing the internet or facing the competition network. And then we set up, and it's running in our untrusted zone because this is untrust traffic. We assign the interface to our untrust zone. And then we set up our interface, our internal interface, which is facing our web servers. Now remember, as I said in the previous slide, is we were given fixed IP addresses for our services that are being scored. So we can't change those IP addresses. So what we have done in the previous couple of videos is when we assign the IP addresses for our untrusted interface, which is Ethernet 1.1 of the firewall, we use those fixed addresses that we were assigned, we assign them to the external interface. And what we're going to do is we're going to create in the video coming up next, we're going to start talking about destination NATs. We're going to create a destination NAT using those IP addresses that are fixed for your services and that you can't change. And then we're going to direct the traffic over to your VM web servers. Now, this gives you a lot of capabilities from backup, which we'll discuss later on. And since it doesn't really matter which virtual server has the services on, I can have all my services on one virtual server, or I can have them on separate virtual servers, because the IP address that you're going to be that is assigned to those services, it's going to be configured on my external interface, and I'm just going to direct it to whichever virtual machine I want to direct it to. So if one fails, then I can bring up another. I don't have to worry about IP addressing because those IP addresses are on the external interface of my firewall, and I have destination NATs directing it to internal servers. As you recall, we also, when we configured our interfaces, we assigned a management profile to each one of the interfaces. We assigned the ping management profile to the untrusted interface, or Ethernet 1.1, our external interface on our firewall appliance. And then we assigned on Ethernet 1.2, we assigned a management profile that will allow us to manage the firewall using SSH and HTTPS. The goal here is to turn off those management features on our management interface, which is facing the internet. It has to be in order to receive updates from Palo Alto for wildfire and for virus signatures, and for URL category updates. Has to be connected. So now what we'll do is, but we don't have to manage it through this interface. So we can turn off management on this interface and then only manage it from our internal interface that's in our trusted zone via a client that's sitting on our EXI host. So that would be a little bit better security posture for us. So let's go over and take a look at the interfaces the interface of our virtual servers right here, how we have that set up. Okay, so here we are. We're in our ESXi host, the web UI, and this is my lone virtual server that I'm going to protect with my VM100 firewall. So this is sitting in the trust zone. Now recall that I don't really that my public accessible IP addresses, those are all assigned to my external interface of my firewall, Ethernet 1.1. We already did that in previous videos. So I don't really have to worry about IP addressing here. I can make the IP address anything I want it to have. Obviously, I want to keep it something that is consistent with my subnet. In this case, my subnet on my trusted zone, when we created our firewall, we created the address that we used on the internal interface was 192.168.20.1/24. So we have to keep this in the 192.168.20.0 network. So what I've done here is I've used what we call virtual interfaces. Virtual interfaces are kind of interesting because I can assign multiple IP addresses to one virtual machine or one host, one Linux host. So let me show you what I've done here. So as you can see here, it's very simple. You can Google it and get some explanations on how to do that. It's a very simple process. Essentially, I've created 3 virtual interfaces, and I have 10, 20, 30. These are all statically assigned. And I've given them addressing 100, 101, 102, and this is what I'll use when I create my destination NAT. So essentially, I have 3 services running on this one virtual machine. And the 3 services I have running on this that we're going to do destination NATs and security policies for are web, FTP, and SSH. So the other thing which I want to test out while I'm here is I want to make sure that I can access the web UI of the firewall. Remember when we configured, as I said earlier on, when we configured the Ethernet 1.2 interface, which is in our trust zone, we assigned it to trust zone. We also gave it a management profile to allow us to manage it using a client on the inside of our network. So let's test and see if we can do that. So there I can see it. This is the IP address of my the firewall's Ethernet 1.2, the internal interface that's connected to trust zone. So I can access the management and I can manage it now from the trusted side using a virtual machine that's running on my ESXi host. So let's go over to the firewall, take a look at that, and set up DHCP. Okay, so before we set up DHCP, let's just go into the device and let me show you how you would turn off your management access to the management interface, and which would be, like I said, it would be a good security practice because this interface is connected to the internet, as we've said before, for licensing and also to get my signature updates as well as my URL updates. So I'm not going to do it here, but if you wanted, this is how you would do it. You just turn it off, and then you click OK, and now you'll only be able to manage the firewall from a client that's sitting in the trust zone and connecting to the internal interface of your VM100. So let's go over to network and let's talk a little bit about DHCP. So you may, obviously, if you're running scored services, you'd probably want to make sure that your internal virtual machines, that they have static addressing, but you also may want to set up clients, and you'd rather have those clients automatically get an address. So DHCP might come in handy for those instances. So let's talk a little bit about it. So it's very simple. I would add it. The interface that I would assign this to would be my internal interface. We don't want to do it on my external interface. You notice I got 3 modes here. So auto, basically, you can operate as a backup. With auto, it'll go out and see if there's another DHCP server running on your subnet, then it will automatically it will turn itself off. If it listens and hears those broadcasts. It will not function as a DHCP server. So that's that explanation of auto. Enabled is that it's always on, regardless, and then disabled means that's off. So we'll set it up as enabled in this case because this is the only DHCP server that I have running in my network. So this is where I assign the pools. Again, I can lease it. I can have a timeout, or I can have unlimited. I can add my pools here. And then my options, I would want to come over and set that up. So my gateway, my DNS, I'm just going to use Google's DNS, but your DNS server might be different. You may want to use an internal DNS server that's sitting on in the trust zone. And that does it. So now we've set that up, and we would hit commit, and we would commit the changes. So that concludes this video session.